Hello everyone, here's our video for this week. I just wanted to give you some notes through video this week. I would like you to have some paper out so you can write some things down. I'm going to be putting some text up on the video to make it easier for you to see and to know what to write down. And you might want to pause it at times to get these things down. Be sure you are taking notes during this video though, because there is a review quiz that you will need to take on Edmodo that's going to cover what you learned in this video, and you may use your notes that you've taken during this video as you take that review quiz on Edmodo. All right, so remember we're in the Renaissance. Remember the Renaissance started around 1300, it goes to about 1600. Last week you looked at a lot of artists that were very prominent during the Renaissance, and so I hope you took the time to look at their work and see the amazing work that they did. Okay, we're going to look at some differences between medieval art and Renaissance art because there are some major differences. All right, medieval art, of course, was sacred. It focused on the church. It was done for the church. All right, so it's considered sacred. Renaissance art is going to be more secular, particularly in the Italian Renaissance. It's going to be mostly secular art produced for someone other than the church. Okay, now the Northern Renaissance up in Northern Europe is going to have a little bit of both, secular and sacred. But the big difference here is that you're going to have some more secular subjects. You're going to have landscapes. You're going to have pictures of things other than scenes from the Bible, or pictures or paintings or sculptures of people from the Bible. All right. Another difference, second difference, is that medieval art was very flat, very two-dimensional. All right. So when you looked at it, you couldn't see any roundedness or depth to it. Renaissance art is going to start having depth. It's going to have 3 dimensions. It's going to be more realistic. All right, so that's a big difference between medieval art and Renaissance art. Medieval art is 2-dimensional and flat. Renaissance art is more realistic and 3-dimensional. We mentioned this last week, but medieval artists did not sign their names to their work. All right, work was produced for the church. It was supposed to glorify God, and it was for the church, so they did not want to draw attention to themselves. Renaissance, during this time, men were more interested in their own achievements and glorifying themselves and bringing themselves, making themselves have a name, and so a name for themselves. And so they started signing their names to their work so people would know who did this amazing work. So that's a big difference. A fourth difference, again, we kind of talked about this, but medieval art is going to emphasize the spiritual world and the life to come. Renaissance art is going to have an emphasis on the physical world, on the here and now, what's going on right now. All right, so those are some main differences between medieval art and Renaissance art. Next, we're going to start looking at music. All right, so again, we're going to start with what music was like in the medieval Middle Ages, during the medieval time period. In the medieval time period, most music was something called plain song or Gregorian chant. It was single line melody. There was no harmony or any other parts supporting the melody line. Most of it was a cappella, okay, and it was produced for the church. All right, almost all the music was produced for the church, and it was sung in Latin. All right, so here's an example of some Gregorian chant that would have been sung during the Middle Ages. This is the Gradual Viderunt Omnes. Again, it's in Latin, but listen for the single melody line. So you can hear it as men singing. It's one single melody line, it's in Latin, and it's a cappella. There's no instrumental accompaniment to it. So that would be all characteristics of medieval music. All right, now we're going to look at music produced during the Renaissance time. And again, as dealing with the themes like in art, a lot of Renaissance music is going to be more secular. There is still music produced for the church, a lot of music produced for the church, but there's also music produced for other people outside of the church. All right, the printing press is going to have a huge impact on music. People are going to have more access to music. More people are going to be learning how to play music, how to sing, things like that. Music is going to move into, again, not just the churches, but into the palaces and the nobles and into the homes of the middle class because of the more accessibility provided by the printing press. And then we also going to have a musical instrument that's going to become pretty popular, and it's called the lute. Lute is a stringed instrument. It's kind of like a guitar, kind of pear-shaped, and it's going to accompany vocalists as they sing. All right, we're going to look at two composers from the Renaissance. The first one is Josquin des Prez. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but Josquin des Prez. He lived from 1450 to 1521. He was a Flemish composer, which means he lived in the area that today we would know as Belgium. He composed sacred and secular, so he composed some music for the church and some music that was not for the church. He's best remembered for his masses, which would be music produced for church service, his hymns. Martin Luther was a big fan of his hymns, and motets. And he also wrote chansons, which are lyric poems that have been set to music. So he composed all of those. Here's an example of some music by Josquin des Prez. This is performed by the Hilliard Ensemble. So notice this one is still a cappella, but you've got two different melody lines singing at the same time. So it's very different from medieval music, which only had one melody line singing at one time. Now you've got multiple parts going on, and that's called polyphony. And you've got many lines of music being sung at the same time or played at the same time. All right, another composer is Palestrina, and Palestrina is known as the Prince of Music. He was probably one of the most famous church composers during the Renaissance, and he is known as the master of polyphony. So again, there's multiple melody lines going on at the same time. So here's an example of his Gloria, performed by a group at Oxford and conducted by Jeremy Sutherland. This is called Gloria. So again, I hope you could hear the polyphony there, the multiple melody lines going on at the same time. All right, now we're going to look at some of the consequences of the Renaissance. What were some of the outcomes, the results of what was going on? We're looking at the Renaissance right now, but the Reformation is going to start to happen towards the end of the Renaissance. And some people see them as two very different, almost opposing ages. The Renaissance was a very secular age that focused on man and what man can do and what man could achieve. The Reformation is going to focus on God, on his salvation. Men are going to have confidence in him and look to the Bible as their sole authority. All right, so they look very different, but the Reformation really couldn't have happened or couldn't have been as successful as it was without a lot of things that happened in the Renaissance. So first we're going to look at some positive results of the Renaissance. So first, the Renaissance encouraged people to ask questions. It encouraged a spirit of inquiry. Second, there's going to be a revived interest in literature. People are going to start looking at ancient texts, whether it's by Plato or Aristotle, but they're also going to look at Old Testament and New Testament texts. Okay, so there's going to be a revived interest in actually learning Greek and Hebrew so that people can actually study the scripture for themselves, and then they're going to be able to ask questions and find answers for themselves. Okay, again, going back to that spirit of inquiry and encouraging to ask questions. The printing press is going to be a huge result of the Renaissance. That's going to help spread ideas quickly throughout Europe. Fourthly, there's going to be an increase of education for more people. The middle class is going to start having access to education, so more people can read, more people can study things for themselves. And then fifthly, the Renaissance is going to stress the individual, man's responsibility to God, and man's individual responsibility to his fellow man. So those are all positive results of the Renaissance. Now, there are also some negative things that happened during the Renaissance, some negative consequences or results of the Renaissance. One is that the need for reform became more apparent as people had fewer moral restraints and started living more immoral lives, and we're going to see that also within the Roman Catholic Church, okay, as a lot of even the clergymen within the Roman Catholic Church are going to live very worldly and immoral lives. So the need for reform is going to be very apparent. Humanism, which is a big part of the Renaissance movement, is going to not only embrace the good things of the classical age, but also the bad things of the classical age as far as heathenism and, again, immorality. Humanists are also going to look at the ancient world and adopt their gods and start worshiping the gods of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. At this point, too, the fourth thing is that man is going to start seeing ignorance as a source of evil, and they're going to put a lot of trust and hope in education as the solution or salvation to all of man's problems, right? Instead of focusing on going to God for the solution for your problems, that people are going to start looking at education for the solution for their problems. And then finally, again, going along with the humanistic ideas that were very prevalent at this time, they're going to view man, people are going to view man as good, basically good, and capable of achievement apart from God. Whereas we know as Christians that we are not good. We are born with a sinful nature, and that we can only achieve things based on what God has given us and the abilities that He's given us. All right, so those are some of your main outcomes and results of the Renaissance, and I hope you're able to get some of those down as I put them up on the video screen. Have your notes ready, and go to Edmodo and take your review quiz, and again, you can use the notes that you took during this video to take that review quiz. All right, have a good week, guys.